Good evening and welcome everyone. I am Dr. Vaishnavi Pradhan and you are listening to another special episode of Respire Lung Cancer Awareness, one voice at a time, an initiative by Voice of Healthcare and supported by NATCO Pharma. At Respire, we believe that awareness is the first step towards prevention and that every voice matters in the fight against lung cancer. Despite being one of the most common cancers globally, lung cancer often remains under the radar, especially in India, where diagnosis frequently happens too late, treatment access is uneven, and stigma continues to cloud public understanding. Our mission with this series is simple: to shine a spotlight on lung cancer through honest conversation with people at the heart of the fight. And today, we are deeply privileged to be joined by one of India's most respected voice in oncology, Dr. Suhail Qureshi, Additional Director and Unit Head of Medical Oncology at Fortis Healthcare, Delhi. With decades of experience of treating cancer and a passion for patient centric care, Dr. Qureshi brings not just clinical expertise but a deep commitment to bridging the gap between innovation and accessibility in the cancer treatment. Thank you for joining us, sir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vaishnavi, and I would like to extend my deepest gratitude to Voice of Healthcare and your partners for taking this initiative and actually becoming advocates for patients, because most of the times these are questions that are topmost in our patients' minds, and sometimes they just escape our notice because of the more imminent aspects of treatment. But I think these patient advocacy issues that you have taken upon yourself to propagate are very important and will go a long way in making the and bridging this gap between the caregivers and the patients.
Okay, to start us off, could you share your observation on how the incidence of lung cancer is changing in India?
Okay, so I'm glad that you brought about this question with a special emphasis on our country and India, because there are certain aspects of this disease which are very, very typical and very characteristics of our country. So we know that as a whole, the incidence of cancer is rising in India, and lung cancer appears to be rising all the more and more so in the urban areas in our country. And this significant rise, if I were to just give you some numbers, then in 2015, uh, the number of annual cancer cases in India which were diagnosed stood at around roughly 59 to 60,000 or in thereabouts. 10 years later, in 2025, we are estimated to have around 80 to 85,000 lung cancer cases in India alone, and that is a huge number. Attested to the fact that we are also estimated to have 60,000 lung cancer deaths in our country alone in this 1 year, and that makes for a huge public health problem. So the cancer trends in India are actually looking quite alarming, especially for the reason that now we are seeing a lot of cancers happening in non-smokers. We are also seeing women being diagnosed with lung cancer. So these are some of the salient differences that we are observing, and definitely the environmental risks about which we shall be discussing in detail later on in the chat are also posing a health concern. But as of today, lung cancer is going to become a major health risk, especially in India and more so in our urban centers. And with the added club with the fact that our population is a younger population, this is going to become a problem uh, for all the healthcare infrastructure to take care of.
Okay, so as you already mentioned in the conversation right now, traditionally lung cancer was mostly associated with smoking, but now we
Right.
hear more about non-smoker being diagnosed with lung cancer. So, what are the
Correct.
reason behind this trend?
So, as I mentioned, that environmental exposures, especially as you said, that historically smoking was considered the single most important risk factor for the causation of lung cancer worldwide. But as the time has passed, various other factors have also come into play, especially the environmental factors like air pollution. So the WHO just 2 3 years ago has actually classified the air pollutants as a class 2 carcinogen. Class 2 carcinogen means that it is next only to those carcinogens which have clearly been proven to have a carcinogenic effect, like smoking. And air pollution is just next to that. So exposure to air pollutants, then also the fact that our populations are now starting to live longer, and with increased longevity, there is an increased risk of genetic mutations that keep creeping in your genetic structure. And with accumulation of genetic mutations, the risk of cancer actually rises itself. Secondly, second-hand smoke is also a very important factor in the causation of lung cancer among non-smokers. More so, occupational exposure to chemicals like diesel exhaust or asbestos, or for that matter, uh, all the factories wherein toxic fumes are generated. They also play an important role in development of lung cancer. A very important aspect that gets overlooked in our country is the effect of radon. So now radon is a radioactive gas which is actually colorless and odorless, and it emanates from the underground, and it is a very important risk factor for causation of lung cancer among non-smokers. In the West, there are specific commercially available devices which can detect the presence of radon in a particular surrounding, and people can take preventive measures if the limit of that radon gas is more than the permissible limit in that area as per the health organizations. Unfortunately, I'm not aware of any such commercially available devices in India or any such organizational frameworks which are tracking the increased risk because of radon. So these are some of the common factors that are important in lung cancer causation amongst non-smokers in India.
Okay, so now that we have understood the etiological factors that are contributing to lung cancer, now we will move towards the diagnosis part. So, understanding that how important it is to diagnose lung cancer at an early stage.
So absolutely, you've actually asked me a very good question, and you've actually hit the nail on its head when you said that what is important is that to detect the cancer at an early stage. So one of the features which I would like to mention, which is again very characteristic in India, is that most of our lung cancer patients are detected at an advanced stage, and that is something which we don't want. We want to detect cancers at an early stage. We want to be able to cure them rather than just give them palliative treatment. It is it is good that we have good palliative treatments available as well, but let us understand that when you're looking at palliation, you cannot cure a patient and you're only looking to add a few months to a patient's life. But when you're actually looking for cure, you're actually wanting to eradicate the disease once and for all. And for that, it is imperative that this disease is detected at an early stage. Why is it all the more important is because the population of Indian cancer patients is actually 10 years younger than what you would see in the West. So in UK or the West, you would have people coming with lung cancer at 55 to 70 years of age. In India, you would get patients at maybe in their mid 40s who are diagnosed with advanced stages of lung cancer. More so in the West, you would have people diagnosed with screening methodologies with early stage lung cancer. And in India, it is this screening that is lacking. And therefore, to detect people with early stages of lung cancer, mass screening programs, or for that matter, screening programs in high risk populations, for example, amongst smokers, among those who have a genetic history of cancer in their family. And therefore, it is important that these patients are taken up for a CT scan, a low dose CT scan at least once a year, so as to be able to detect cancers early and for us to be able to cure them.
Okay, so now that we know that an early diagnosis play a key role in diagnosis of or the treatment of lung cancer, we need to understand that what are the early symptoms or signs that a patient should not ignore in order to facilitate the diagnosis of lung cancer.
Right. So, very often in early stages of lung cancer, you may not get any symptoms, and that is perhaps the irony of it. That you're actually looking for symptoms, and there are actually none. And that is exactly the importance of screening. That you do a screening for those patients where you don't evidently have symptoms as yet, and the disease has not actually grown to that proportion so as to produce symptoms. And there you will be able to detect cancers at a very early stage, where you'll be able to treat them by maybe surgery and eradicate them completely, or maybe a combination of chemotherapy and immunotherapy followed by surgery and so on. So, amongst the early signs and symptoms that one might observe and be watchful for are maybe a chronic cough that refuses to go away, loss of appetite, passage of blood in your sputum, chest pain, breathlessness, maybe your exertional dyspnea. That means when you're walking, you start feeling dyspnea, you start feeling breathless. These are some of the early signs that you might observe when a person has lung cancer. Very rarely, someone might present with a hoarseness of voice or a change in the texture of the voice, which might indicate that the tumor may be compressing upon the nerves which are involved in the production of voice. So these are some of the salient signs and symptoms that one must look out for. And if any of these symptoms are happening, you should bring it to your doctor's notice.
Okay. So now, since we are addressing the early signs and symptoms, and along with that, we are addressing the screening part, how readily it is available, like across India, the low dose CT scan or the other tools which are important for the diagnosis of lung cancer, and what changes can be done in that accessibility part?
So low dose CT scans are fairly easily available in most of the hospitals in tier 1 and tier 2 cities in India. Wherever a CT scan is available, a CT scan machine is available. A low dose CT scan is just a very regular procedure for those diagnostic labs. And it does not take too long. It takes barely 15 to 20 minutes for a low dose CT scan of the chest to be done. And the reporting is easily available the next day. What is required is actually a concerted effort from not just the patient or the patient advocates, but also from the government agencies, so as to evolve a program wherein lung cancer screening can be rolled out like a public interest initiative, just like we have rolled out the pulse polio program, or just like we roll out the various vaccination programs. Because lung cancer is a disease that can happen to anybody, regardless of your uh, history of smoking or risk factors, because pollution is now very endemic to our part of the world, especially in third world countries. Having air pollution in India, in Delhi for that matter, does not mean that your air is cleaner in maybe 50 kilometers away from Delhi in a place in Noida or Gurgaon or Faridabad, because the air travels and the air pollution here is actually spreading very thick and fast. So we have to be, on our toes with the public-private partnerships, roll out programs which can detect this particular disease in its early stages, and have a kind of a consolidated strategy with the government in place and the private players, so that some strategies can be evolved, not for everyone, but maybe for high risk people, for those high risk groups which are more prone to developing lung cancer. And that will go a long way in actually countering this threat and diagnosing cancer at an earlier stage than what we normally see in our clinics every day.
Okay. So now that we have ruled out the screening part and the diagnosis part, I would like to move towards the treatment part. So, what are the treatment options that are available for patients who are diagnosed with lung cancer?
Okay. So, this is my favorite part of the conversation because lung cancer treatment has seen a tectonic shift from what it was maybe 10 years back and maybe 15 years back. And today, lung cancer is actually the poster boy for various targeted therapies and immunotherapies which have transformed the landscape of lung cancer care, not just in India, but the whole world. So, in stage 4 lung cancer, when the eventually where we used to see the patients, many genetic mutations were found out which could enable us to treat the cancer by targeted therapy, which means just by simple oral tablets. Many of these mutations, like EGFR, ALK, ROS, MET, HER2/neu, NTRK, these are mutations which allow us to treat the patient by simple oral tablets or targeted therapy. And with the advent of better targeted therapies now available, longer survival outcomes have been seen with patients who are once considered incurable. So, stage 4 cancer, we used to give a survival yardstick of 6 to 9 months, maybe 20 years back. But today, there are long term survivors who are living beyond 3 years, 4 years, 5 years with these therapies. Immunotherapy has been another shot in the arm for oncologists around the world in the treatment of lung cancer. And many effective immunotherapies have allowed patients to live healthier lives without the toxic effects of chemotherapy. Not just that, a combination of chemotherapy and immunotherapy now being employed in early stages of lung cancer have enabled the surgeons to actually convert an a previously inoperable lung cancer to an operable lung cancer and actually result in better outcomes. So, the growing armamentarium of drugs in lung cancer, like the targeted therapies, your immunotherapies, and your chemotherapy, have all combined together to give the patient the best of both the worlds.
Okay, so if we can break this down even further, how is immunotherapy different from the traditional chemotherapy that we were having before?
Okay, so chemotherapy, what always used to be given previously, it's not as if we don't give chemotherapy now. It is still employed, and today chemotherapy is given with combination of immunotherapy to enhance each other's effect and make a synergistic combination. That's the first part of your answer. Secondly, the second part of your answer, which deals with how are they two different. So chemotherapy basically kills all the cells in the body, whether they are cancer cells or the normal cells of the body. So it has uh, impact on all the bodily cells. Immunotherapy has a very typical way of functioning, wherein it enhances your body's own immune cells, the T lymphocytes of your body, to identify the tumor cells in the body, which the immunity has so far forgotten to recognize, because the tumor cells are actually fooling our body's immunity by mimicking that they are a part of your own body. So what immunotherapy does is it goes inside and it stimulates your T lymphocytes, your immunotherapy, your immunity cells, and makes them understand that this tumor is not a part of your body and you have to start functioning against it. So our immunity, which was so far dormant, now begins its function. It gets reactivated and starts fighting the cancer cells specifically by targeting certain proteins on their surface, which are not expressed on the normal cells but are expressed on the cancer cells. And this increased immunity then leads to our own body's immunity fighting on warding off the cancer cells and not having any impact on the normal cells of the body. So these two different therapies, which is chemotherapy and immunotherapy, are now not mutually exclusive, but now they are employed synergistically to actually enhance each other's action. They are now used in early stages to make an inoperable tumor into an operable tumor, and also to prevent the recurrences of the cancer once the patient has been completely cured of it. And in stage 4 or late stages, it is also helpful to prolong the survival.
Okay. So that was a very elaborate answer on that one, and I think it has breaking it down, that what is the difference between the two. Now that we know that there are these many treatment options available, how do we distinguish between patients that okay, this patient need this kind of treatment? So what is the segregation that way, and how do you decide that what is the treatment plan for a particular patient?
So that's a very relevant question again. So whenever a patient of lung cancer comes to us, regardless of what stage that patient has come to us, we always discuss this amongst our colleagues in a multidisciplinary tumor board, wherein surgeons, chemotherapy experts, which are medical oncologists and radiation oncologists, and molecular pathologists sit together and devise a plan which is best suited for a person. So that basically means that now you are treating patients on an individual level by customizing the treatment for one person. So even if there will be two patients of lung cancer, they might be of the same age, they might have the same risk factors, and yet they may have different molecular patterns in their cancer, which may mean that both of them may be treated entirely differently. So there is no one size fits all approach in lung cancer. Every patient's treatment is customized and individualized to suit his needs based on the molecular markers that you find in his from the patient's tissue, whether it is a biopsy from a lymph node or the lung itself or fluid from the lung. It is always subjected to molecular and genetic analysis, and based on the genetic analysis, a treatment path is then evolved as to what would be the best way for that patient to take treatment with. Whether it can be a combination of chemo and immunotherapy followed by surgery if the patient has early stage cancer, or if the patient has advanced stage cancer, whether it will be only oral tablets based on certain mutations that you find, or a combination of chemotherapy or immunotherapy, or maybe only immunotherapy, because there are certain biomarkers that we test on these biopsy specimens like PDL1, which, if found to be in a very high proportion, also allow us to treat the patient with immunotherapy alone. And therefore, there is no single answer to the question that you've asked. And every patient will actually have an individualized treatment plan tailored to his molecular markers.
Okay. So basically, it depends on the stage or the screening test, etc., that the patient goes on, and then the treatment plan is decided.
Correct.
Moving to the next question, that is that how accessible, because we are a country of like growing economy, and there is a lot of segregation in the accessibility of treatment. So how accessible is the treatment of lung cancer, especially in small towns?
Yes, so that is a question which is uh, which presents us with some logistic challenges, because what I said regarding immunotherapy, genetic testing, molecular analysis, in tier one cities and to an extent tier two cities, it is fairly easily available, and also patients can have access to these particular tests in the most of the major urban centers in India. Unfortunately, in rural areas or tier 3 cities where the access to healthcare is limited, there is definitely a paucity of not just diagnostic testing or screening procedures, but also experts who can provide the patients with the kind of opinion that is needed for them to take this kind of a treatment. And many of the times when patients come to us from these tier 3 cities, they have been either misdiagnosed or not diagnosed at all. Many of them have been taking anti-tubercular treatment for maybe months on end without any benefit, thinking that they are suffering from tuberculosis, because tuberculosis is still quite prevalent in our country. And more often than not, in tier 3 cities or rural hinterland, in a primary health center, a patient is likely to be considered to have tuberculosis rather than cancer. And some doctor or the other may have advised him anti-TB treatment based on just empirical evidence of seeing a mass on the lung and the clinical profile, because the clinical profile is very similar to having a tuberculosis and a cancer. So yes, there are challenges that we face, but I think it is through initiatives like this which reach out to the deepest corners of our country, where now internet has proven to have this far reach, where everything is now available on your mobile phone through the internet, where people will understand and realize that these symptoms are not just tuberculosis, and therefore it is important for them to maybe seek attention to a higher center, or the doctors themselves to refer the patients to higher centers if these symptoms gives them even the slightest hint that this might be cancer. Remember, there is no age bar of developing lung cancer. Today, I have seen a young patient with lung cancer as young as 28 to 30 years old with lung cancer. I've seen women. I just had a lady around 37 years of age, around 3 years ago, who came to me with stage 4 lung cancer. And it's a very interesting story which I'd like to share with my viewers. That she was misdiagnosed as TB at a center in a tier 3 city, which was around 500 kilometers from Delhi. She was referred here, and she had breathlessness. Her lungs were full of fluid. We tested that fluid, and in that fluid we found cancer cells, and we sent that for a genetic mutation. We found a genetic mutation in her tumor, which was called RET mutation, RET, RET. Now, a drug which is available to treat this particular mutation is a simple tablet, but that tablet was not available in India. It was available outside of India. So we wrote to the company which manufactures that drug and asked them for a compassionate access to this particular drug for this patient of ours who was young and had two small children, because this drug was not available in India. They were generous enough to allow us the compassionate access to that drug. And 3.5 years since then, she's been getting that drug completely free of cost and happens to be disease free as of today. So, someone who would have lived not more than 3 to 6 months at that point in time has actually gone on to live for more than 3.5 years by just taking a simple oral tablet every day. That is the power of molecular oncology and customizing treatment for the patients.
Yeah. So, having said all of that, apart from the physical battle that a patient suffers with, there are many psychological challenges also after the diagnosis of lung cancer. So, if you could address that what are the psychological challenges and how the caregivers play a role in the treatment of cancer?
So it's a very pertinent question again, and I would say that more often than not, when patients comes to us, many people around that patient or their caregivers or their first contact health workers may have painted a doomsday scenario for them. कि कैंसर हो गया अब तो कुछ नहीं हो सकता. And more often than not, patients are extremely devastated, sad, and depressed. And many of the times we look after the physical suffering, but it's the mental agony and anxiety that often gets overlooked. So I'm glad that we actually brought that up. So in our hospital, we have access to qualified onco-psychologists and a full-fledged psychiatric evaluation team takes care of the mental aspect of the anxiety and the stress of cancer when these patients are actually facing that problem. This patient whom I discussed about, her primary fears were about her two young children. What would happen to them if she was not around? And that is a very concerning thought for any parent. So I completely agree that the psychological aspect of suffering also needs to be taken care of at the same platform and with the same sense of urgency and sincerity as the physical aspect. Many of these patients, out of sheer anxiety and stress, may refuse to keep their appointments with the doctors because of the simple fear of coming to a hospital, the simple fear of undertaking chemotherapy, whereas sometimes chemotherapy may not be required at all. So I think it is important that we talk to our patients, we allay their anxiety and their concerns, put on board a qualified psychologist or a psychiatrist if the need be, and evolve a comprehensive mental health assessment as well as the treatment starts, and make sure that their hand is held at every step of the way.
Okay, so I think that was a very comprehensive session that we have already assessed or answered all the questions around screening, diagnosis, the treatment, and the challenges that we are facing in current landscape of lung cancer treatment. So I would like to thank you for joining our session and taking out time and speaking around all the relevant topics. And I hope our viewers get a benefit from this session, and we seek more such conversation and breaking the buzz about lung cancer and getting an early treatment of lung cancer.
I think
Thank you.
that was a very fruitful session. And if I may just summarize the conversation that we had in a few points before we wind up, I would say that most important message that should go out from here today is that number one, lung cancer is not a death sentence in the 21st century. So let us not paint a doomsday scenario for our patients. Number two, chemotherapy is not the only way that we treat lung cancer today, and a host of targeted therapies and immunotherapies are actually transforming the way we take care of lung cancer. Number three, each lung cancer patient is a unique patient, and the treatment will actually depend on the genomic analysis and molecular markers. And number four, we cannot do anything about lung cancer until we stop smoking, do efforts to remove air pollution from our cities, and stress the importance of a healthier lifestyle.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for joining. And I hope our viewers get a benefit from this and they believe that they are not alone in this and there is treatment for their disease. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Dr. Vaishnavi. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.